band of light. If a cockroach were near him, or a cocktail waitress, the picture would show two such bands of light. Our awareness is all that is alive and maybe sacred in any of us. Everything else about us is dead machinery. Citizens of Midland City, he said, I salute you. You have given a home to a masterpiece. Dwayne Hoover, incidentally, wasn't taking any of this in. He was still hypnotized, turned inward. He was off his rocker. He wasn't playing with a full deck of cards. It was now high time, I thought, for Trout to meet Dwayne Hoover, for Dwayne to run amok. Kilgore Trout entered the cocktail lounge. Dwayne Hoover was still mentally absent from activities in the cocktail lounge. He sat like a lump of nose putty, staring at something long ago and far away. Dwayne moved his lips as Trout sat down. He was saying this soundlessly, and it had nothing to do with Trout or me. Goodbye, Blue Monday. The bartender in the cocktail lounge now flicked on the ultraviolet lights in the ceiling. Bonnie McMahon's uniform, since it was impregnated with fluorescent materials, lit up like an electric sign. So did the bartender's jacket and the African masks on the wall. So did Dwayne Hoover's shirt and the shirts of several other men. The reason was this. Those shirts had been laundered in wash day products which contained fluorescent materials. The idea was to make clothes look brighter in sunlight by making them actually fluorescent. When the same clothes were viewed in a dark room under ultraviolet light, however, they became ridiculously bright. Bunny Hoover's teeth also lit up, since he used a toothpaste containing fluorescent materials, which was supposed to make his smile look brighter in daylight. He grinned now and appeared to have a mouthful of little Christmas tree lights. But the brightest new light in the room by far was the bosom of Kilgore Trout's new evening shirt. Its brilliance twinkled and had depth. It might have been the top of a slumping open sack of radioactive diamonds. But then Trout hunched forward involuntarily, buckling the starched shirt bosom, turning it into a parabolic dish. This made a searchlight of the shirt. Its beam was aimed at Dwayne Hoover. The sudden light roused Dwayne from his trance. He thought perhaps he had died. At any rate, something painless and supernatural was going on. Dwayne smiled trustingly at the holy light. He was ready for anything. And I sat there in the cocktail lounge of the new Holiday Inn, watching Dwayne Hoover stare into the bosom of the shirt of Kilgore Trout. There in the cocktail lounge, Dwayne Hoover's bad chemicals suddenly decided that it was time for Dwayne to demand from Kilgore Trout the secrets of life. "Give me the message," cried Dwayne. He tottered up from his own banquette, crashed down again next to Trout, throwing off heat like a steam radiator. "The message, please." And here Dwayne did something extraordinarily unnatural. He did it because I wanted him to. It was something I had ached to have a character do for years and years. Dwayne did to Trout what the Duchess did to Alice in Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. He rested his chin on poor Trout's shoulder, dug in with his chin. "The message," he said, digging in his chin, digging in his chin. Trout made no reply. He had hoped to get through what little remained of his life without ever having to touch another human being again. Dwayne's chin on his shoulder was as shattering as buggery to Trout. "Is this it? Is this it?" said Dwayne, snatching up Trout's novel. "Now it can be told?" "Yes, that's it," croaked Trout. To his tremendous relief, Dwayne removed his chin from his shoulder. Dwayne now began to read hungrily, as though starved for print. And the speed reading course he had taken at the Young Men's Christian Association allowed him to make a perfect pig of himself with pages and words. Dwayne Hoover got to his feet now, having wolfed down tens of thousands of words of such solipsistic whimsy in 10 minutes or so. He walked stiffly over to the piano bar. What made him stiff was his awe of his own strength and righteousness. He dared not use his full strength in merely walking, for fear of destroying the new Holiday Inn with footfalls. He did not fear for his own life. Trout's book assured him that he had already been killed 23 times. On each occasion, the creator of the universe had patched him up and got him going again. Dwayne restrained himself in the name of elegance rather than safety. He was going to respond to this new understanding of life with finesse, for an audience of two, himself and his creator. He approached his homosexual son. Bunny saw the trouble coming, supposed it was death. He might have protected himself easily with all the techniques of fighting he had learned in military school, but he chose to meditate instead. He closed his eyes, and his awareness sank into the silence of the unused lobes of his mind. Ray Bocara-Beckian and Beatrice Keedsler and Bonnie McMahon all grabbed Dwayne now, pulled him away from Bunny. This increased Dwayne's glee. "Never hit a woman, right?" he said to the creator of the universe. He then socked Beatrice Kiesler on the jaw. He punched Bonnie McMahon in the belly. He honestly believed they were unfeeling machines. There was a map of Dwayne's rampage in the paper the next morning. The dotted line of his route started in the cocktail lounge, crossed the asphalt to Francine Pefko's office in his automobile agency, doubled back to the new Holiday Inn again, then crossed Sugar Creek in the westbound lane of the interstate to the median divider, which was grass. Dwayne was subdued on the median divider by 2 state policemen who happened by. Here's what Dwayne said to the policemen as they cuffed his hands behind his back. "Thank God you're here." "Listen, Dwayne Hoover hurt so many people seriously that a special ambulance known as Martha was called. Martha was a full-size General Motors transcontinental bus, but with the seats removed. There were beds for 36 disaster victims in there, plus a kitchen and a bathroom and an operating room. It had enough food and medical supplies aboard to serve as an independent little hospital for a week without help from the outside world. Its full name was the Martha Simmons Memorial Mobile Disaster Unit, named in honor of the wife of Newbolt Simmons, a county commissioner of public safety. She had died of rabies, contracted from a sick bat she had found clinging to her floor-to-ceiling living room draperies one morning. 2 physicians in the disaster vehicle named Martha were Cyprian Ukwendi of Nigeria and Kashdor Miasma from the infant nation of Bangladesh. Both were parts of the world which were famous from time to time for having the food run out. Both places were specifically mentioned, in fact, and Now It Can Be Told by Kilgore Trout. Dwayne Hoover read in that book that robots all over the world were constantly running out of fuel and dropping dead while waiting around to test the only free-willed creature in the universe on the off chance that he should appear. Dwayne Hoover was now hustled aboard Martha through big double doors in the rear just ahead of the engine compartment. Here's what Dwayne yelled in the ambulance: "Goodbye, Blue Monday." Then it seemed to him that another day had passed on the Virgin planet, and it was time to yell again. "Not a cough in a carload," he yelled. Kilgore Trout was one of the walking wounded. He was able to climb aboard the Martha without assistance and to choose a place to sit where he would be away from the real emergencies. He had jumped Dwayne Hoover from behind when Dwayne dragged Francine Pefko out of Dwayne's showroom and onto the asphalt. Dwayne wanted to give her a beating in public, which his bad chemicals made him think she richly deserved, and so on. Trout grabbed him from behind. Trout's right ring finger somehow slipped into Dwayne's mouth, and Dwayne bit off the topmost joint. Dwayne let go of Francine after that, and she slumped to the asphalt. She was unconscious and the most seriously injured of all, and Dwayne went cantering over to the concrete trough by the interstate, and he spat Kilgore Trout's fingertip into Sugar Creek. Kilgore Trout did not choose to lie down in Martha. He settled into a leather bucket seat behind Eddie Key. Key asked him what was the matter with him, and Trout held up his right hand, partly shrouded in a bloody handkerchief. Martha began to move. Kilgore Trout saw a sign he liked a lot. This is what it said: "It is harder to be unhappy when you are eating Craig's ice cream." The people Dwayne had injured so unjustly would sue him so vengefully that he would be rendered destitute. He would become one more withered balloon of an old man in Midland City's Skid Row, which was the neighborhood of the once fashionable Fairchild Hotel. He would be by no means the only drifter of whom it could be truthfully said, "See him? Can you believe it? He doesn't have doodly squat now, but he used to be fabulously well-to-do," and so on. The Midland City Festival of the Arts was postponed because of madness. Fred T. Berry, its chairman, came to the hospital in his limousine dressed like a Chinaman to offer his sympathy to Beatrice Kiesler and Kilgore Trout. Trout could not be found anywhere. Beatrice Kiesler had been put to sleep with morphine. Kilgore Trout assumed that the arts festival would still take place that night. He had no money for any form of transportation, so he set out on foot. He began the 5-mile walk down Fairchild Boulevard toward a tiny amber dot at the other end. The dot was the Midland City Center for the Arts. He would make it grow by walking toward it. When his walking had made it big enough it would swallow him up, there would be food inside. I was waiting to intercept Trout about 6 blocks away. I sat in a Plymouth Duster I had rented from Avis with my Diners Club card. I had a paper tube in my mouth. It was stuffed with leaves. I set it on fire. It was a soigné thing to do. "Mr. Trout," I said from the unlighted interior of the car, "you have nothing to fear. I bring you tidings of great joy." "Are you from the Arts Festival?" he said. "I am from the Everything Festival," I replied. "The what?" he said. I thought it would be a good idea to let him have a good look at me, and so attempted to flick on the dome light. I turned on the windshield washers instead. I turned them off again. My view of the lights of the county hospital was garbled by beads of water. I pulled at another switch and it came away in my hand. It was a cigarette lighter, so I had no choice but to continue to speak from darkness. "Mr. Trout," I said, "I am a novelist and I created you for use in my books." "Pardon me," he said. "I'm your creator," I said. "You're in the middle of a book right now, close to the end of it, actually." "Mm-hmm," he said. "Are there any questions you would like to ask?" "Pardon me," he said. "Feel free to ask anything you want. About the past, about the future," I said. "There's a Nobel Prize in your future." "A what?" he said. "A Nobel Prize in medicine." "Ha," he said. It was a non-committal sound. "I've also arranged for you to have a reputable publisher from now on. No more beaver books for you." He said. "If I were in your spot, I would certainly have lots of questions," I said. "Do you have a gun?" he said. I laughed there in the dark, tried to turn on the light again, activated the windshield washer again. "I don't need a gun to control you, Mr. Trout. All I have to do is write down something about you, and that's it." "Are you crazy?" he said. "No," I said, and I shattered his power to doubt me. I transported him to the Taj Mahal, and then to Venice, and then to Dar el Salaam, and then to the surface of the sun where the flames could not consume him, and then back to Midland City again. The poor old man crashed to his knees. He reminded me of the way my mother and Bunny Hoover's mother used to act whenever somebody tried to take their photographs. As he cowered there, I transported him to the Bermuda of his childhood, had him contemplate the infertile egg of a Bermuda ern. I took him from there to the Indianapolis of my childhood. I put him in a circus crowd there. I had him see a man with locomotor ataxia and a woman with a goiter as big as a zucchini. I got out of my rented car. I did it noisily, so his ears would tell him a lot about his creator, even if he was unwilling to use his eyes. I slammed the door firmly. As I approached him from the driver's side of the car, I swiveled my feet some, so that my footsteps were not only deliberate but gritty too. I stopped with the tips of my shoes on the rim of the narrow field of his downcast eyes. "Mr. Trout, I love you," I said gently. "I have broken your mind to pieces. I want to make it whole. I want you to feel a wholeness and an inner harmony such as I have never allowed you to feel before. I want you to raise your eyes, to look at what I have in my hand." I had nothing in my hand, but such was my power over Trout that he would see in it whatever I wished him to see. I might have shown him Helen of Troy, for instance, only 6 inches tall. "Mr. Trout, Kilgore," I said. "I hold in my hand the symbol of wholeness and harmony and nourishment. It is oriental in its simplicity, but we are Americans, Kilgore, and not Chinamen. We Americans require symbols which are richly colored and three-dimensional and juicy. Most of all, we hunger for symbols which have not been poisoned by great sins our nation has committed, such as slavery and genocide and criminal neglect, or by tin-horn commercial greed and cunning. Look up, Mr. Trout," I said, and I waited patiently. "Kilgore?" The old man looked up, and he had my father's wasted face, when my father was a widower, when my father was an old man. He saw that it was an apple in my hand. "I'm approaching my 50th birthday, Mr. Trout," I said. "I'm cleansing and renewing myself for the very different sorts of years to come. Under similar spiritual conditions, Count Tolstoy freed his serfs. Thomas Jefferson freed his slaves. I am going to set at liberty all the literary characters who have served me so loyally during my writing career. You are the only one I am telling. For the others, tonight will be a night like any other night. Arise, Mr. Trout. You are free. You are free." He arose shamblingly. I might have shaken his hand, but his right hand was injured, so our hands remained dangling at our sides. "Bon voyage," I said.